What is up, everybody? It is Dr. Vibe. As always, I like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. I'm the host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show. I like to call it conversation, but to say it's a show, so I'll say show. I call it conversation. And I also am a certified empowerment coach. But it's not about me. It's always about the people in the square and the audience that is watching and sharing. And I love it when I get a chance to have a brand new friend on the show. And Marilyn Barefoot, and believe it or not, she's actually Torontonian also, which is even better. And what is Marilyn all about? Well, geez, she is a powerhouse. From what I've read, she's classically trained in tier 1 companies like Coca-Cola, McDonald's, General Mills, Nike, and Microsoft. She combines a wickedly smart and analytical brain with a creative spirit that knows no bounds. She's a summa cum laude graduate. Whoa! From major advertising companies like Vickers and Benson, Bozell Palmer Bonner, Cosette Communications, and BBDO. Those are heavy hitters. Heavy hitters. She's obsessive about originality and is a 3-time nominee for the Rutman Canadian Woman Entrepreneur of the Year. She's pretty smart too, and she's a hands-on leader. She's got high energy, and she conducts high-energy brainstorming sessions, trademarked big storming, that lead to powerful results. And she's going to be at the Paracon conference that is happening this Thursday and Friday in Atlanta. That's being driven by Jay Stone, and I love Jay Stone, and I know I'm going to love Marilyn. So welcome to the Dr. Vibe Show, Marilyn Barefoot. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me on the show, Dr. Vibe.
Wonderful. What a beautiful day in Toronto today.
It is amazing. It's like July.
There you go. There you go. Well, I know we have a limited amount of time for you to share. So outside of that lovely bio that we heard about, can you give a little background about yourself, where you grew up, where you went to school, etc.?
For sure. Thanks. I am born and raised Torontonian, which is an odd thing sometimes when we're in an international city here. And my background is advertising agencies. So I like to call myself an advertising agency brat. You read out some of them that I worked for on the bio when you were introducing me. And one of the things about the advertising agency business was that we were constantly put in situations where we were asked to do brainstorming sessions because we were the creative people and we were to come back with the big ideas for the clients. And in my experience with the agencies that I worked with, there was no process for brainstorming at all. It was a bunch of creative people sitting around a pizza in a room looking at each other saying, does anyone have an idea? Wow. So that's what led me to do what I'm now doing, because we never ever got anywhere sitting around a cold pizza and warm drinks talking to each other saying, does anyone have an idea? So there had to be a solution. So I went on a journey to find it, and I believe I have.
Nice. Let me see if we can go a little bit further back. What got you into the advertising world? Was it something you always wanted to do, or did it happen by accident? Was it a plan? How did you get to that world?
A number of answers. Number one, yes, it was something I always wanted to do, but I got there sort of through a jagged, crooked road because my parents thought that the advertising business was too weird, too flaky, and they're very traditional, and it's like, no, you've got to do the regular stuff that fits in a little box. We don't want you going into an advertising career. So I came to it sort of through a jagged road. But when I got there, I knew that I was meant to be there because I loved it. Now, originally, I wanted to be on the creative side, the design side, the graphic design side specifically. But I didn't have the right training for that, so I ended up on the account side. So I was like senior vice president of client services. In other words, the liaison between the client and the creative.
Wow. Do you remember your first job in advertising, and what was it, and how was it like?
My first job in advertising was with Bozell Palmer Bonner, one of the agencies that you mentioned. And I was working on the promotions for Coca-Cola, which was positioning themselves as the official soft drink of summer. My role as the most junior person in the entire team while I was doing that was to order all the stuff for the promotions. So I got to order beach towels and beach balls and coolers and patio umbrellas. And I thought I died and gone to heaven because I was spending somebody else's money and I was in charge of ordering all the cool stuff.
Nice, nice. So during your advertising career, how can I put this? How male dominated were the environments that you worked in versus female dominated?
Yeah, well, given my age and the amount of time I've spent in the advertising business, the senior people, presidents and vice presidents, were mostly men. And that was if you will, a bigger offense on the creative side. On the creative side, it was pretty much all men. Now, it's changing, and I know there's been a lot of articles written recently about creative directors, very, very important, very well-decorated creative directors around the world that are female now. But then, which we're talking 25 to 30 years ago now, not very many had really broken into that space. But we're making great strides now.
Excellent. What made you decide to get out of that world and do something on your own?
I think from a very young age, you either know you've got that drive to be an entrepreneur or you don't. I mean, I remember at age 10, 11, 12, traveling with my parents and looking at businesses and looking at opportunities and thinking, wow, they could do it like this and it would be way better. So I think I always had that sort of in my DNA. And after a while in the advertising business, it felt to me as if the advertising business was doing everything they could to make an awful lot of money, but not necessarily everything they could to do the right thing for the client's business. And I felt like this magic, this development of big ideas is really at the core of what any advertising agency actually is. So I'd like to work directly with clients and agencies to be really at the genesis of the big ideas before the agencies start to blow them out and turn them into campaigns.
So I always like to ask this conversation piece for people that go on their own. Do you remember the moment that you said, it's time for me to do something on my own?
Yes. It was probably as somebody walked a cardboard box into my beautiful corner office at BBDO and said, bye-bye, clean your office. And I went, you know what? In the advertising business, people get downsized and outsized all the time. And it's not because we're not doing a great job. It's as the accounts move back and forth. So if a large account walks out the door, there has to be cuts in order for them to be able to shrink down to a size that can still be profitable. So BBDO was on a bit of a losing streak. And I was relatively new. I'd been there less than 3 years. So I was relatively inexpensive to, if you will, outsize. So when they walked into my office and said, here's the box, we'll walk you to the door, I thought, you know, if you work for yourself, which I've really always wanted to do, nobody could ever do that to you anymore.
Nice. So this event happens. How did you get started in the next part of your journey, which was entrepreneurship?
Well, I've had a couple of dances with entrepreneurship. My first dance was owning my own agency for 8.5 years. That agency was called Square Peg. I was in business. I had 16 employees. We were based at Spadina and Adelaide downtown. And we did very well and worked for really large clients for that entire time. But we were never on a retainer basis because we were more of a below the line, which is what they called it, type of agency. So as things started to hit like SARS and 9/11 and economic downturn, it became very difficult for us to continue, quite honestly. So I made the decision to close that company. And everybody walked, everybody found jobs, everybody had a wonderful run for 8.5 years. I had that business, and then I went back into the traditional advertising agency business. And I think once you've had a taste of the entrepreneurial life, you always want to go back there.
Nice. So let's get to what you're known for today, Barefoot Brainstorming. Where does the foundation, how did you come up with this wonderful terminology that has Dr. Vibe puzzled and curious to heck? Where did Barefoot Brainstorming come from? How did it originate?
Well, my name is really Marilyn Barefoot. And I remember at 5 or 6 years of age going to kindergarten and my very first day of my very first experience at school, realizing that that was not going to be a name that was going to be a hell of a lot of fun to suffer with through the rest of my life at school. At that point in life, there weren't an awful lot of people even understanding the word bully. It was just whatever, deal with it. And I remember saying to my dad, I just can't wait to get married to change my name. And when the time came for me to make a decision to walk away from such a crazy name, I absolutely couldn't, because I can phone somebody that I haven't spoken to in 20 years and say, hi, it's Marilyn Barefoot, and they'll know exactly who it is, because there's just not a lot of barefoots walking around in the world. So when I decided to go out on my own to do brainstorming work, Barefoot Brainstorming was just a logical, because it was memorable, it was fun, and it's really my last name.
Well, and why did you focus on the area of brainstorming?
I had the experience of working for Tetra Pak in Scandinavia, maybe 15 or 18 years ago now. And when I was doing work with them, I had my agency, and they exposed me to a facilitation process that I took to like a fish to water. It turned out to be the Creative Problem Solving Institute's approach to creating big ideas. So I was trained in Scandinavia, and then I was further trained and certified in the United States, in upper state New York. I think when you find your passion, you just know it. Every single fiber in your body says, this is what I was meant to do. I took to it. I loved it. I couldn't get enough of it. And I did a lot of it when I had my own agency, and it was always very, very successful. And so when I shut the agency and decided to go back out on my own, I said, you know what, this is really what I want to focus on, is a blank page and creating big ideas.
Nice. Before I go any further, one of the words that's coming to my mind from what you've shared already is resiliency. Mm-hmm. Where do you get that from? Because you've been in and out of entrepreneurship, and it seems that you're a very resilient young lady. Where do you get that from?
I think it must be born in you, or you must just figure it out when you're a kid. Because I remember as a kid, there wasn't the here, let's put it on a silver platter for you. It's like, you want to do that? Well, then go out and figure out how to do it. So when you've grown up with go out and figure out how to do it, you don't overthink stuff. You just say, I want to do this, so I'm going to go out there and figure out how to do it.
Right. Excellent. So how long has Barefoot Brainstorming been in existence?
10 years.
How were the first few years of Barefoot Brainstorming? How was it received by your target market?
Well, I had done this kind of brainstorming work for my clients when I had my agency. So my first line of sales, if you will, was to go out and approach companies like Campbell's Soup and Coca-Cola and Microsoft and say, hey, I'm back out on my own, but this is what I'm focusing on. And people had remembered in a very positive way their brainstorming experiences. So there was business, but largely, Dr. Vibe, people looked at me like I was nuts, because they said, nobody has a line in their budget for brainstorming. This will never work. You're crazy. Your business model is far too narrow. It'll just never work. Wow. Now, what we saw happening was the world started to understand that innovation and creativity and big ideas was something that is going to become a currency that is critical to any brand or any corporation in moving forward, in being successful and being profitable. So it was, like any small business startup, it's always tough at the beginning, and you're eating a lot of Kraft dinner and peanut butter sandwiches. But when you know you're doing what you love, you keep going. And it's not about the money, it's about you are doing what you love. So it's do what you love and the money will follow. Mine, I think, took a couple of delayed buses, but it got there eventually.
Well, congratulations. Fantastic. Can you highlight maybe one or two turning points in the journey of Barefoot Brainstorming that took it from one level to the next level? Because as you shared, when even today people want to brainstorm and they just go, what can you highlight one or two turning points in the journey for us?
I think when the phone started ringing for me, as opposed to me making the phone ring, from corporations like Coca-Cola, different brands that had not worked with me before, or companies like Burger King would pick up the phone and call me from Miami and say, we're doing 100-person offsite, and we've heard that you're awesome, and we'd like you to come and facilitate a half-day brainstorming session for our 100 people. And I'm like, how did Burger King in Miami hear about me? So when those calls start to come in, then you start to realize that you're getting some traction in a good way.
Nice. So obviously you're busier probably than ever. What are you seeing change in corporate culture when it comes to brainstorming? You said that things are changing. What things have you seen in corporate culture change in order for them to pay more attention to brainstorming and the services you offer?
I think that people are realizing, first of all, that innovation, creative thinking is very, very important to any success in business these days. And that, keep on doing what you have been doing for the last 20 years, only maybe change the price or change the color, is not going to work in today's society. I think the second thing that people have realized is that once they've experienced a brainstorming session that's been facilitated by a professional facilitator, they understand that it is a science and that it is an art, and that it isn't something that you can just ask anybody in your organization to make happen for you. So I think those two realizations are coming together in a nice way, and that they're realizing that if they're bringing in a professional and they're bringing their people together and they're spending the time and money, it's worth it because of the amount of great ideas that they get out of it at the end of the day.
I look at an individual like yourself that has a very unique perspective of the business world these days, because you get to brainstorm and you get to actually see the people and what they're thinking, how they're thinking.
Yeah.
What do you feel is going right in the corporate world, and what do you feel is not going right as we sit on April 18th, 2016?
Well, I think in the world of creativity, as it relates to businesses, there is a great desire to be creative and to be innovative and have new big ideas. And so there is, on the initial step forward, they hire me and we do an amazing session together, and I always complete that with a big report. So I write up all the ideas and deliver them a cleaned up, beautiful report. And then my concern, and where sometimes you say what's going right and what's going wrong. So that's going right. There's a lot of openness around, let's bring her in, let's come up with ideas. They're very excited about the ideas. But then there's a hesitancy, or there's a scared about actually making those ideas come to life. Because a lot of them are big and a lot of them are different, and it represents an awful lot of change, and it represents an awful lot of commitment. And sometimes on the front side, they're very excited about it, but then will they actually follow through? So I offer sessions beyond the original brainstorming session to talk about implementation and how are we going to make it happen and who's in charge, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, I, as an outsider partner, can't force their hand to make it happen. So companies really do need to commit to it 100% rather than just, facially, if you will.
Right. Do you do any of your sessions for individuals or entrepreneurs?
All my sessions usually involve groups. So usually the size of group that I'm working with, the smallest is like 4 to 6 people. The largest I've ever done is 350 people in Las Vegas. Wow. But it's a lot of the chemistry of people working together and building on each other's ideas. So I don't ever say to somebody I could do a one-on-one, but if you've got a few people in a room, I can do a small group. So if we've got, 4 people, we could have a group of 2 and another group of 2. If people really thrive and generate fabulous ideas when they have other people in the room working with them.
Working with medium to large groups, do you notice, well, I'm sure you notice, what do you view in regards to clashes between generations? Like you have your Gen X's and you have older people in organizations. Is that a challenge when it comes to doing brainstorming sessions? No? Okay. No, well, I just want you to share.
It's not in the way that I generally approach it. And we often have lots of different categories, if you will, of age categories in the room. Before this session, I ask people to complete a little creativity quiz called Charting Your Brain Operating System. They don't know what their score means. It takes 2 minutes. They do the little score, and then they send me their score. It'll help me to understand if they are one of 3 types of processors: a realist, a builder, or a dreamer. So I create the little teams that we use in our brainstorming sessions based on that quiz. So I don't care whether you're 19 years old or 99 years of age. It's all about how your brain processes creatively. And I think when we put it on those terms, people understand that everybody has something to offer and that we all process a little bit differently. And as I set up the room that way, then it becomes very easy. And I think the older people love the younger people's perspective and vice versa, because everybody brings new ideas to the table from their own backgrounds.
Could you share with our audience one of the most satisfying brainstorming sessions you gave? Now, and you don't have to give the name of the company, but can you share an experience that just made you feel like this is so wonderful, this opportunity to do this?
Well, I've got a couple stories, and let's talk about Burger King, because they'll let me talk about this.
Okay.
Every single brainstorming session I do is satisfying because it's always a different topic, always a different group of people, and always different ideas. But the couple of stories that came out of Miami were as follows. We had 100 people in a room, and they were in a pretty fancy big hotel in Miami, and everybody was broken down into teams. And I noticed in the first half an hour that one team was not really talking, not really getting into it. And it happened to be the team that the president of the company was sitting on. So I went to him and said, "Could I speak to you for a second?" And we took him away from the table, and I said, "You need to leave." And he said, "What do you mean I need to leave? I've arranged all this. I'm paying for all this. I want to be here." And I said, "Well, you can be here when the teams present their big ideas, but you cannot be in the fray of these folks going through this process because they're terrified of you and they don't want you to judge them and they don't want to look silly. I can feel it coming off of them." And he's like, "Well, I'm not judging them." And I said, "Well, you may or you may not be, but they feel like you are. So go out, check emails, do whatever you need to do, and I'll tell you when you can come back in." So that was interesting from the standpoint that you realize that if you're going to have very senior people in the room, put them on their own team, because I had the guy from the mailroom on the team with the president, and he was terrified. So once the president left, the guy from the mailroom, hands down, had the most creative ideas of anybody during the entire day. It was amazing. And it sort of proves that point that it doesn't matter who you are, he's not from marketing. Well, that doesn't matter. He doesn't have to be from marketing to have really cool ideas. And some of the ideas that he came up with, they actually test marketed and they went national. The other story from Miami was one of the things we do after lunch to get everybody's blood moving and breathing, etc., and just up and out. We did a scavenger hunt, and I said, "Bring me back a couple of the strangest things you can find." So one team brought me back the doorman from the hotel, and they stood the doorman in the middle of the table, and we generated some ideas around the doorman. The actual task was, how are we going to increase the breakfast day part business at Burger King? So the doorman was the inspiration for what became something they did in the Northeast, I believe, around having a breakfast doorman greeter kind of person at all the Burger Kings. So they would hand you your newspaper. They would open the door for you. They'd help you with your stroller if you're coming in. They'd give dog biscuits out in the drive-thru. They'd refill coffees. They just make the whole breakfast experience so much nicer, and it worked like a charm. But it was pretty funny. At the end of it all, we found out that each of the guys on the team had given the doorman $20. So for standing on top of the table for about 15 minutes, he walked away with $250 or something.
That's great. What do you see as the cost for companies that don't take brainstorming seriously?
Well, I think they'll end up copying their competitors, or they'll end up just keep on doing what they have been doing without any ability to make significant creative changes to their business model. That's if they're not doing it all. And then I think that it's a real tragedy if they go ahead and they do the sessions and then they're too afraid of change to actually move forward with the ideas. They do have to be committed to it and see it through to make sure that the people really feel as if, well, you meant it. We did the brainstorming session and now we actually see these ideas come to life.
Nice. Why do so many companies are afraid to take the long-term vision? Because I see the value that you bring to organizations, and it just seems that there seems to this, is it just a basic resistance to change a lot of times?
Well, I think there's that in human beings in general when, the same reason people will struggle with losing weight or struggle with quitting smoking, or change for human beings is tough. And when you put them in situations where it's different than what they're accustomed to, then that feels uncomfortable and they don't like that feeling, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of Canadian companies have been accustomed to just waiting to hear what the United States head office will tell them to do, which is not a great thing either because, the Canadian marketplace is different than the United States. So I think there has to be, I say to people, you need a little, I hate the word committee, but you need a little group of people who are going to champion this. So beyond the brainstorming session, let's talk about this group of people who are going to put this idea on a pedestal and make sure that it happens and nurture it through the process.
Nice. Well, tell us how you got the opportunity to go down to Atlanta and share with the upcoming Paracon conference. How did that all happen? Because I'm very excited for you.
Well, thank you. I had been asked to speak at a conference in South Florida, a social media conference last June, and I wasn't able to go. I had a conflict. And so I joined their Facebook group, Alex de Carvalho. I think you may know of him. And they post regularly, and it's fabulous. And Barbara Pender, one day on that Facebook group, said, I'm looking for speakers for this conference that Jay Stone is launching this year in Atlanta. And if you're interested, I'd like to chat with you about it. And so I said, I don't know anything about this conference, but I'd love to chat with you about it. So I got on a conference call with Barbara Pender and then another conference call with Jay Stone and described to them what I did, sent them a little something about what I did and sent them some references. And they said, great, we'd love to have you. So that's how it came. It was all social media that drove that awareness.
Wow. I'm so happy for you. Really and truly. That's going to be great for you because that's an incredible event that's happening. The people, including yourself, that are there. Wow.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it and just, exposing people to what I do, but also I get to attend the conference. So I'm so looking forward to learning a ton of things from the other speakers.
Right. I know that our time is running down quickly. Is there something you're looking to achieve when you are going down to this conference?
I'd love to have people walk in the room and look around and see my setup, etc., and be very curious about the process. And in fact, a lot of people walk in with very negative perspective on brainstorming because they may have been in brainstorming sessions in the past that have been awful and a waste of their time and nothing really came of them. I love to have the folks walk in and within 45 minutes to an hour have people just their minds just blown by what is possible and the great ideas that they were able to come up with, plus the great friendships and relationships that they make by working in teams to create those ideas together. So I always love that part when they walk out and they say, wow, I walked in here thinking this was, just another brainstorming session, but wow, that's really cool what happened here today.
Well, as we close down our conversation, and you were a superstar like I knew you were going to be, before we let you go, any tips do you have for people out there when it comes to brainstorming you'd like to just share with us?
Well, I think the tips are this, simply that people feel like there's categorizations like, oh, I'm not a creative person. And I think that's something I hear on a regular basis is like, I can't do this because I'm not a creative person. At the end of the day, all of us are very creative people if you're given a process to work with. If we're not given a process, then of course, nothing's going to just strike us out of the sky. So I don't like people to think of themselves as, oh, well, I'm not creative, but that guy over there is creative. You have to believe in yourself that everybody has this inside of them, including the mailroom guy at Burger King, because he was a very creative person. It's just that nobody had ever given him a process before.
Wonderful. Well, on that note, we're going to end our conversation. I'd like to say thank you to you. And people who are watching this either live on the replay, we went back and forth so many times, but it was so worth it.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, it was very much. And Marilyn, anytime you want to come on and share on the show, the mic is always open. If people want to contact you, how can they do that?
Email is Marilyn, Marilyn, at barefootbrainstorming.com. And my website is www.barefootbrainstorming.com. So there's a lot of ways you can touch base with me.
And remember, everybody, she is a Canadian just like Dr. Vibe. So I'm going to protect her at all costs. So don't pick on her.
Thank you.
Right. And for those who are going to Paracon, I know you're going to have a great experience with not only Marilyn, but all the sharers and presenters down there. And if you want to find out more information about Paracon, just go to paracon.live. There are some tickets left. Also, if you can attend, they are offering a live stream package, so you can watch the stuff going on the main stage via live streaming. I am Dr. Vibe. I'm host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show, also certified empowerment coach. As always, I'd like to say you're blessed and highly favored. You're a magnet for miracles, and you're a solution for someone's problem. And as always, God bless, peace be well, keep the faith, and have a great evening. Bye-bye.